Okay, welcome to all those in attendance at this predetermining hearing on Monday, the 15th of March 2021, to consider a report and to listen to views on the proposed erection of an active retirement community with circa 60 units in the mix of apartments, cottages and houses and a 20-bed nursing home, including a small-scale local shop, cafe and community allotments and associated infrastructure at Binghill House, Binghill Road, Aberdeen. Report number 200750. The report before members does not provide an assessment of the merits or failing of this proposal. Please note that the hearing will be recorded and published online for public access after the meeting. For members, please leave your camera on for the duration of the hearing. Your microphone, however, should be muted and only switched on when you're invited to speak by myself. For officers and external individuals joining the hearing, please switch off both your camera and microphone when you're invited to speak by myself. I will now ask the clerk to advise the members participating today and all members to confirm their attendance when the hearing has been announced by the clerk, so that this is clear for the recording the meeting and can also be recorded by the clerk the minute. Ms. McBain.
Thank you, Convener. I'll just do a quick roll call for the members for the recording. So please state that you're in attendance. Councillor Bolton?
Here.
Councillor Stewart? She's not here. Councillor Allen?
Here.
Councillor Cook?
Good morning.
Councillor Copeland?
Here.
Councillor Cormie? I put you on mute, Councillor Cormie, sorry.
Here. Yeah.
Councillor Gregg?
Here.
Councillor Mackenzie?
Here.
And Councillor Malik?
Here.
Okay, back to you, Convener. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. This predetermining hearing is a quasi-judicial business. It's advisable that members do not leave the room or meeting during consideration, and comfort breaks will be provided at the discretion of itself. So if anybody's desperate, please catch my eye. The information: councillors observing today's meeting should not activate their cameras or their microphones. They should not play an active part in today's proceedings. If members wish to speak, they should enter speak in the chat panel or use your hand feature, which will be visible in the meeting. The clerk and myself will monitor such requests. Alternatively, members can verbally indicate their wishes to speak if it's not possible to use messaging or signalling by activating your camera. If members lose connection or have any technical issues during the meeting, they should alert the clerk, if possible by private chat out with the meeting chat, so that they can make the convener aware of the issue. So for today, the speakers that we have, members of all those present also have for them a programme for today, which sets out the running order of presentations we will receive, and they're as follows. Given we don't have a site visit, we will have that information covered in more detail by Mr. Clark, Mr. Gavin Clark, police officer, which has meant we've given additional time for his presentation. So Mr. Gavin Clark will summarise the planning application and material consideration. He'll have 20 minutes with 10 minutes for questions. He'll then be followed by Mr. Michael Cowie, Senior Engineer Roads, will outline aspects of the application, impacts and issues. Again, 10 minutes for Mr. Cowie and 10 minutes for questions. What I'm proposing to do, members, as we did previously, was we'll run Mr. Clark and Mr. Cowie into one and take the questions for the two of them at one time. The applicant has a total of 20 minutes. The speakers they've identified is Steve Crawford, Planning Director at Halliday Fraser Monroe, Stephen Barker, Architectural Director at Halliday Fraser Monroe, Professor Norman Hutchison, Independent Advisor Housing for an Ageing Population at the University of Aberdeen, and Shona Byers, who's the applicant. And I would just remind that it's a total of 20 minutes for all four. For questions, they have identified Alex Scott, Planning Consultant, HFM, Nigel Astle, Astle Associates, Ecological and Agricultural Queries, and Bruce Clark, Cameron Ross, Drainage and Transport. They have 20 minutes for questions. Sorry, I can hear someone speaking. Is that their mic off? Thanks. We then move on to statutory council fees, which we have Cultsfield Side and Timber Community Council. We have Colin Morsley. He has 10 minutes for his presentation and 10 minutes for questions. All other representations, which we have 3 of, have 5 minutes each. That's Bruce Anderson, followed by Carolyn Annand, followed by Stuart Jackson. They'll all have 5 minutes questions after. Please ensure that you stick to your allocated times. Members are reminded that in terms of the code of conduct, you must not give grounds to doubt your impartiality. You must not make any public statements about a pending decision. Ensure that you're not seen to be prejudging a decision which will be made in a council meeting. You must not indicate or simply imply your support or opposition to the proposal, or declare your voting intentions before that meeting. Following today's meeting, a minute will be prepared by the clerk, and this, together with a case officer's final report of handling, will be presented to the Planning Development Management Committee in due course for consideration and determination. So to be clear, there will be no decision made today. If I could just remind, if I could ask those who are not council members, apart from Mr. Clark and Mr. Evans, sorry, I keep wanting to say Evans, sorry, Gavin Clark. Could you, Miss Caroline, and we've also got Shona, if you could put off your cameras for now. That's super, thanks very much. Now, with that all done, if we could just go on to the agenda, is there any declarations of interest, members? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands. If we could then just check in the chat and it's something was in there. Give me one moment. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so if we move on to the general business, which is the erection of an active retirement community, circa 60 units in the midst of mixed apartments, cottages, houses, and a 20-bed nursing home, including a small-scale local shop, cafe, community allotments, and associated infrastructure at Binghill House, Binghill Road, Aberdeen. Information can be found on the packs on page 5 to 60. Planning reference 200750, and I'm now going to hand over to Mr. Gavin Clark.
Thanks, convener. I'll just share my presentation. Okay, so thanks for that. I think you've just described what the development is, so it's in front of you there. But as members are aware, it's normal practice to undertake a site visit prior to hearings. It's not been possible to do this given the current situation, so the following images and photographs should be of some assistance as a substitute. So the first image I have up here is an aerial photograph of Mill Timber with the settlement sort of to the south, Binghill Road over to the east, Contlaw Road to the west. We have North Deeside Road to the south and the application site at the top, at the top of Mill Timber. The Old Fold development is over here to the east as well, just for context. So the next slide I have is the location plan, which shows the application site boundary in red, although it looks a bit more orange. I'll come on to this in a bit more detail later on. And again, just a closer up aerial photograph of the site. So we have Binghill House here in the centre of the site, Mill Timber to the south. Then there's obviously a number of fields and a number of trees through the site and steading buildings here to the north. So I'll just go through some photographs now of the site. This is the existing access to the site from Binghill Road. So there we go. Then again, the next photograph again is from Binghill Road. This shows the proposed access location to the site, which would loop through this field here and then swing through the trees. Again, I'll show you a site plan later, which will show that in a bit more context. This is another photograph just showing a similar location, but further up the road, which leads to the steadings. And again, this is the proposed location for the access and the suds pond. Next photograph just shows a number of the protected trees that are at the front of the site. And again, this is taken from the road that leads to the steading buildings. This is again from the same road, but this is looking south towards Old Fold. You can just see a number of houses along the tree line there, which are obviously under construction, and that's the development site area for that. Next photograph shows again the existing access to the site. This is again looking south towards Binghill Road. And a similar photo, but this is looking north heading towards Binghill House itself. The next photograph here is from Binghill House, sort of looking southeast towards Miltimber. And again, this is looking southwest from Binghill House. This is the application site. Let's say number of trees, number of areas of grass sort of round about there. Next photograph, I've just taken a panoramic image from the same location as the previous two photos, just looking along the southern part of the application site. And again, this is looking east from the site. Just another photograph for you. Then we go looking south from the centre of the site. So this is looking towards a sort of looking towards Miltimber itself. There's a number of houses just beyond this sort of tree belt here. And again, this is looking west from the centre of the site. The next image is looking east from the lower section of the site. So just off screen to the right is the settlement of Miltimber. To the left side, Binghill House would be up to the north. And as I say, this is just looking east from the lower part of the site. And this is just another view of the lower section of the site. And this is looking east from northwest. I think you can just see Binghill House just in the distance if you see my cursor there. And again, another photograph just looking west from within the site. And again, another photograph just showing a different context from within the site. Another one from the centre of the site, looking sort of north towards Binghill House, which is hidden behind this tree. And again, looking northwest from centrally within the site. A number of these photos look the same, but I've just taken it from different parts of the site. Again, this is looking northeast from centrally within the site, and again, you can see Binghill House just there in the distance. This is from looking west towards Binghill House, so towards the top of the site with the proposed allotments over this side and the housing, which would be proposed to the right of this image. And again, another one just showing an image of Binghill House from the south. So I'm just going back again just to show that you've obviously seen this location plan a little bit earlier, but this is just showing it again. Binghill House here, and a number of the photographs were taken from within this section here. This is the existing access showing there, and the next image will potentially show, or a couple of images time will show where the applicants are proposing to take access to the site from. Again, just an aerial photograph, just so, seeing as you've seen the photographs, you can now just see the site again, so you'll understand it a little bit better, hopefully. So given the proposal is for planning permission in principle, the applicants have submitted a site plan, which is merely for indicative purposes to demonstrate what could potentially be accommodated on site, with future applications required for the approval of matters specified in condition, requiring to address aspects such as the layout, siting and design of the proposed units, and the layout of the proposed road. The indicative plan has the access in the eastern section of the site, so just here, which one of the first few photographs showed this field here, with the main build elements located in the centre, western and southern parts of the site here. So we obviously have the settlement of Miltimber here, Binghill House here, the retirement homes here, proposed cafe here, housing around, and then obviously areas of open space and existing tree belt there. The retirement home, it should be noted that this layout is for information purposes only, and the planning authority are essentially looking at the red line boundary and the principle of the development, as mentioned previously. The next image shows the current local development plan designation of the site in green. That is green belt and green space networks. So if you look at my cursor, it's essentially just this area here, and that's obviously shown as green belt and green space network. The settlement of Miltimber is shown in purple, which is obviously designated as H1 residential area in the local plan. There's an area of urban green space here, and the old fold land release policy is just shown at the side of the site for context purposes. The next image shows the site and proposed Aberdeen Local Development Plan. Again, just if you see my cursor roughly there, it's proposed to retain that as green belt and green and blue infrastructure, which would be the new name for essentially the green space network. And again, it's still residential areas to the south. The settlement on timber is in sort of an orangey colour there. We have Old Fold over here as well. The application constitutes a major development, and due to it being contrary to the principal policies of the local development plan, requires a predetermination hearing. The proposal was subject to statutory pre-application consultation with the applicants and officers presenting to the pre-application forum in September 2019. The pre-application consultation report forms part of the current submission, and it should be noted that no assessments of the merits or failings of the proposal are made within this report. As mentioned, the site is zoned as Green Belt and Green Space Network. Policy NE1, which is Green Space Network, advises that the Council will protect, promote and enhance the wildlife, access, recreation, ecosystem services and landscape value of the Green Space Network, and that proposals for development that are likely to destroy or erode the character and or function of the Green Space Network will not be permitted. Policy NE2, which is the Greenbelt policy, states that no development will be permitted in the Greenbelt for purposes other than those essential for agricultural, woodland and forestry, recreational uses compatible with an agricultural natural setting, mineral extraction, quarry restoration or landscape renewal. The policy further states that proposals for development associated with existing activities in the Greenbelt will only be permitted if all of the following criteria are met. The development is within the boundary of an existing activity, the development is small scale, the intensity of the activity is not significantly increased, and any proposed built construction as ancillary to what exists. Policy NE2 makes no provision for development of the level proposed, and the application therefore represents a significant departure from the development plan and the requirement for this predetermination hearing. At the Planning Committee in September 2020, it was agreed by the Planning Development Management Committee that this predetermination hearing would be held in front of the members of the PDMC rather than full council. It should also be noted that Binghill House was listed in November 2014 as a Category C listed building. As a result of its listed status, there is a duty on planning authorities in determining planning applications to have special regard to the desirability and preserving of the building or its setting and any features of special architectural or historic interest which it possesses. Other aspects that we would need to take into account during the determination of the planning application include the landscape impact from the proposed development, the impact on natural heritage, including protected species and trees, and the site's accessibility, amongst other things. The proposed local development plan was approved by full council in March 2020 and represents the settled view of the council. The allocation of green belt and green and blue infrastructure, currently Green Space Network, is proposed to be carried forward to the proposed local development plan. Statutory consultation was carried out in the plan in the latter part of 2020 with 261 responses supporting the site's continued exclusion from the proposed plan. The proposal itself has received 173 representations, which includes 147 in objection, 24 in support and 2 neutral comments. Cults, Beeldside and Miltimber Community Council, who will be speaking later, have also objected to the proposed development. These comments and representations have been summarised in the associated report that you have before you. Colleagues in Roads, who will be speaking after me, have raised no objection to the proposal, and Developer Obligations have advised of contributions towards the core path network, healthcare and community facilities. All other technical consultees are content with the proposal, and all other aspects could be controlled via condition. These have also been summarised in the associated report. Following this meeting, a report will be prepared for the Planning Development Management Committee with a full and detailed assessment of the proposal and making a recommendation to members. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clark. If we could move on to Mr. Canning, please. Feedback.
Morning, everyone. As mentioned by Gavin.
Gavin, could you put your mic on?
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks.
Sorry, as mentioned by Gavin, this application is for a planning permission in principle, and I wish to apologise if it may appear that I repeat anything that Gavin's already referred to. Roads Development Management are assessing this application and proposal based on the information and indicative proposals provided at this stage, in order to satisfy that the principle of such development is acceptable and engineering solutions are feasible. Gavin provided an indicative site layout, but it should be noted there's also a alternate drawing within the transport statement, which shows a slightly different indicative single general vehicle access to Binghill Road from via Binghill Road in the southeast of the site. There shall also be an additional emergency only access utilising the existing track, which was also shown by Gavin. Given the nature and the volume of the site, such access is a minimum requirement to allow manageable and safe access and serving of the site. The detailed design of these accesses shall require to be designed to ACC standards and would be subject to roads construction consent. This shall require to be conditioned and purified via future MSE applications. In addition to these vehicular accesses, there proposes to be pedestrian connections into the existing and surrounding mill timber area, which is certainly required, with again clearer details of the internal footpaths and connections being conditioned and detailed as part of future applications. Within the transport statement, the applicant has also indicated to extend and tie in footpath extension of the east side of Binghill Road, which is partially being done and carried out as part of the new Mill Timber Primary School works within the adjacent Old Fold development, also shown by Gavin's plans. Unfortunately, given the site's location north of North Deeside Road, it will be located out with the desired walking distance to nearest public transport links and bus stops located on North Deeside Road to the south. Therefore, the applicant proposes to provide private shuttle buses and services for the residents to allow trips to local amenities and to further bus stops if required. The initial proposals provided show continued connectivity throughout the site with footpaths and roads, with parking also showing and shall require to be provided as per Aberdeen supplementary guidance. Full details of the internal site layout and such provision for the site shall be assessed and as part of future applications, giving the indicative nature of this drawings provided so far. As part of the supporting transport statement, the applicant provided information on typical volumes and trips for the use of this nature, which is considered minor and would have no adverse effect on the localised and surrounding network and nearest junction of Binghill Road and North Deeside Road to the south. Additionally, given the nature of the proposed for a retirement community, it is also considered that many of these potential trips shall occur out with the peak periods and again have no adverse effect on the surrounding network. The drainage impact assessment indicates appropriate levels of treatment, but further details and proposals shall require to be provided as part of future applications, given this site is a planning permission in principle. As it has been reiterated throughout by myself and by Gavin, this is early stages of an application process and more detailed assessment shall require to be carried out upon receipt of future applications with clearer designs and details provided. I am happy to answer any questions you may have on this application and shall try to answer it to the best I can. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Excuse me, Mr. Cowie. Just before I take questions from members for officers, could I perhaps ask Mr. Clark if he could put up a visual where he could point to where the new Mill Timber School is, because I noticed that wasn't on any of the plans, and obviously the photographs fell under waste, so they're obviously not quite as new as we would have probably.
Yeah, I don't know if I've got one. I can quickly maybe go into Google Maps just to get a street view image up, if that would be of assistance, if you just bear with me a couple of minutes. Sorry, I'll just be 1 minute.
That's okay, no problem.
Hopefully this works, if you bear with me a second. So I've just got Google Street View up here, just to let me know if you can see that. So we have, obviously, I think, sorry, it's rolling around. We obviously have the access to the site up here. And if it just lets me swing round, the Miltimber Primary School is going in just here. This is obviously an older image because it's Street View, so this was pre Old Folk development. And I'll just swing around again just so you can get a bit more of the context. Is that okay?
Yeah, I mean that's helpful. I mean, I obviously have, probably Councillor Malik have a slight benefit of obviously it being our ward, so we're very aware of where the new school is, and also
Yeah.
Councillor Malik's vice convener of education, so would know that as well. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware where the
Yeah, and that's
is.
obviously just looking south down Binghill Road as well.
Yeah. Okay,
Okay.
that's good. Thanks very much, Gavin.
No problem.
Members, can I ask if you've got questions for Mr. Cowie or Mr. Clark? Sorry, Gavin. There's too many Gavins in planning.
I know. There used to be 3, there's now only 2.
No. Okay, I see a hand. Councillor Gregg.
Yeah, thanks. On the subject of Binghill Road, there was mention there of a pathway down the east side of Binghill Road. I wonder if we could see that on the map, on a map system somehow. And I think that was to connect the site with the school. It would just be useful to have a visual of that, if that's possible.
I'll see what I can do.
And I've got a second question. If maybe I could ask that in the meantime.
Yeah, on you go. Yeah.
Which is about the provision of shuttle buses. Would that be a permanent facility that would be provided, or for a time limited?
Yeah,
time?
that might be a better question for you to ask of the applicants once you get the opportunity to do that. I mean, they are proposing to utilise a shuttle bus to obviously connect the site to Binghill Road and the connections that then go into the city and then obviously out to Deeside. We would have to look at how we could control that, whether that would be an illegal agreement of sorts, but the applicants can potentially answer that question in a little bit more detail for you as well.
Thank you.
Okay.
I will keep looking for an image of that footpath connection, and then when I get it, I'll let you know to put it back up. That's okay.
Thank you. It's just to have a kind of a visual aid. That's all. Many thanks.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Gregg. I've got Councillor Cook.
Thanks, Convener. For Mr. Clark, a couple of questions. One's on trees. Obviously, this is a kind of an outline, not definitive proposal as yet. Reading the background documents, I'm looking that there are going to be 22 trees cut down for the for construction purposes. Is that right? It might be like a couple more, couple less. Is that? Am I right? Am I correct in thinking that's the case?
Yeah, I mean, the symmetry survey indicates that there will be a loss of 22 trees. That could potentially be more because there's obviously things that we need to take into account, such as zone of influence, and also the proposing a geogrid that would allow the access into the site. So as I say, it could be more than 22, but that's what the tree survey indicates.
Thanks, that's helpful. And the other one is, and this might be a wee bit of a how long is a piece of string question, in which case I apologise. Obviously, this one's in the green belt, and we have a presumption against development in the green belt, but there are circumstances in which we do allow it. So, for example, as a slightly controversial example, Kingsford Stadium is in the green belt, but we allowed it. Could you just remind us of the sort of circumstances in which a development in the green belt would be allowed where it would not normally be allowed?
Well, obviously there was the example of Greenbelt, sorry, not Greenbelt, Kingsford, and the reasonings behind that. So to allow something in the Greenbelt, it would obviously either need to comply with the Greenbelt policy, or material planning considerations would need to outweigh the provisions of the local development plan. That could be, for example, a lack of housing supply, amongst other things. It could be other things such as, so that would probably be the main reason for potentially going against something like this, but there could be other examples as well.
Thanks. I think that's me done for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cook. Councillor Copeland.
Can I just, I was going to say, I found a drawing that might answer Councillor Gregg's earlier question that I've managed to get of the primary school. So could I try sharing that with you? Yes,
certainly. We'll come back to you, Councillor Copeland.
Thank you.
I hope this works. I've got so many screens open at the moment. So where is it? Here. Can you see this drawing?
No. Oh, wait a minute, something's happening. Yeah, we've got it. Thanks.
Okay, so this is the proposed Mill Timber Primary School with the new road going in here. There's a footpath that would run up along the site here, and this is the existing access over here into Binghill House, and the proposed access would be sort of up around there. So I hope, Councillor Gregg, does that answer your question on that?
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
I wondered if the path was intended to continue southwards at all, or
it looks, if you see obviously the red line, it looks as though that I didn't deal with his planning application, so I don't potentially know the answer, but there is a path on the southern side of the road, and it, from that image there, looks like a footpath as well, that would run there too.
Okay. That's helpful.
Okay.
Thank you. That's
No
great. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Gregg. Back to yourself, Councillor Copeland.
Thank you, Convener. That drawing's actually partially answered my question. Whether if Gavin could put up the aerial photograph of the site, please.
Yeah, bear with me just 1 second.
I'm glad it's you having to put these up, Gavin, because we'd be lost if it was me.
Where are we? Is this one okay, or would you rather the one with the wider mill timber context?
No, that one's okay.
Yeah,
now,
okay.
Am I right in thinking that Mill Timber School is going into this green bit here on the right-hand side?
Can you see my cursor?
Yes.
Yes. So that's if you saw the last image, it's essentially going in just that part there.
Yeah, that's just what I wanted to do. That is currently designated as what?
That's part of the Old Fold land release. So there's obviously a number of residential units getting built at Old Fold, and the school falls within that designation.
So that's actually the Old Fold development, that bit.
Yeah, the primary school is getting built within the Old Fold development. Okay,
and what's proposed for this bit next? Is that allotments in that bit beside the trees, but immediately above the school?
So this, if you see my cursor, just that section there, that's in the local plan. That's obviously still green belt and proposed as green belt. But I'll just go to another image. This one here. So it's this section here. So the applicants are proposing that as their access road, Suds Pond, and some sort of park with landscaping.
Splendid. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, is that you, Councillor Copeland? Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you. That's me.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Malik.
Thanks very much, Mr. Clark. Can I ask a question in relation to the distance between the proposed development and the new junction of the Timber Primary School? Because as you know, the safety of our children is paramount to us. Although you have shown us a photograph just not long ago, the path can go down the hill towards south side as well. But what is the exact distance? And the second one is, if I can ask again, well, 22 lots of trees, maybe more. How many more roughly? About 10 more? How many roughly can you guess? Or kind tell us how many more?
Yeah, I'll just sort of show the last image I had of. I don't have an exact distance, but I can clarify that at a future meeting of the planning committee. So I'll just share this image again of the primary school. So we have this here. So this is the proposed junction for Milltimber. Sorry, you can see that. Yeah, that's the proposed junction there for the primary school, and the proposed junction for Binghill would be there. So looking at that, you could be 20, maybe 25 meters. That's a guess without being able to measure. So yeah, that and then obviously I can't quantify the question on trees. It is 22. It could be a lot more than that. It could be a lot less, and not as many as it could be 10, 20. But I can't answer that. I don't have I'm not got the correct qualifications. But the tree survey says 22, but it could potentially be more than that. But I can't give an answer, an exact answer to how many that would be.
Okay, thanks, Gavin.
Okay.
Is there any more questions for officers? I just got one at this stage. No, I'm not seeing anybody. Could I just ask Mr. Clark, you indicated, it's back to Councillor Malik's point about the trees, but when you were giving your presentation, you suggested that the trees at the front where the access would be are protected. Is that, are they TPO'd or?
Yes, so I think it's the first 110 metres of the access are so from Binghill Road heading north. The first 110 metres are covered by a TPO, so they are protected trees. There's no TPO covering the rest of the trees.
And in terms of an archaeological dig, is there anything like that required? Because I'm aware that there is a site of something up there.
Yeah, I mean, the applicants have submitted some archaeological information, and we obviously consulted our archaeological service, and they have requested a further written scheme of investigation. And there would, after that, potentially, if there are obviously remnants found, other works may well be required as a result of that.
Okay, and just the final question. I know Councillor Gregg already touched on it, the shuttle buses. I know when we've done previous applications and there's been a suggestion that buses would be provided by, that we haven't been able to condition that. But are you saying that there's potentially another way that would ensure the?
It's something I would potentially have to discuss further with colleagues in legal. It wouldn't be something we could condition, but it may be something that could be incorporated into a legal agreement. But that's potentially a discussion prior to going to committee that we would need to just have with colleagues in legal to see how we could control that, if we could or if we couldn't control that in a legal agreement.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Evans. Sorry, Mr. Clark. Apologies to those who are joining us. Mr. Evans is another one of our senior planners and who I have regular contact with, so hence the name confusion I keep having. Okay, if we can now move on to the applicant. I've got Mr. Steve Crawford indicated first, so I'll hand over to you, Mr. Crawford.
Thank you. I'll just try and share my screen for the presentation. No, right, that's working. Hang on a second. Can you just give me a minute till I get this sorted?
No problem, Mr. Crawford.
Sorry, that's the wrong thing. Sorry, excuse me a sec.
That's okay. We'll start the 20 minutes from when you get it started.
apologies, this worked the other day there. It's not working today. Can I maybe ask my colleague Alex to maybe try and share her screen? She has also access to the, or maybe Stephen Barker, actually. Thank you.
Okay.
That's better. Can move. That's just a holding slide. Move to the next slide, please. So, okay, we're ready to go if you're. That's
Yes, that's fine. We'll just start the timing now.
okay. Thank you. I'm Steve Crawford. I'm Planning Director at Halliday Fraser Monroe. I'm going to be speaking about the planning application. We have Stephen Barker, who's our Architectural Director, who will be speaking about design and concept. Professor Norm Hutchison, who University of Aberdeen, who will speak about ageing population, and the applicant, Mrs. Shona Byers, as well. So first of all, next slide, please. First of all, I'd like to talk about the planning situation. So setting the scene around planning. So the site, as you've seen, is immediately north of Milltimber. It includes Binghill House and Grounds, which is a private house in residential use. The proposal is for an age-specific over 60s retirement, active retirement extension to the Milltimber community, offering choice in the housing market for the over 60s. It's designed as low rise, low density and low impact, and it opens up the grounds for public use. It includes other community uses, such as a small shop and cafe and allotments. And just for noting, there is an active local development plan bid, which is going through the process at the moment. So there is scope potentially to rezone this site, should it be approved. Next slide, please. In terms of what's round about, you've got an established residential area to the south, which you've seen, the Old Fold to the east, converted steading and a few houses to the north, woodland blocks to the north framing the site, and woodland buffers to help integrate development into the landscape. But there's no doubt that this site is part of Milltimber. Its current use is residential, the proposed use is residential, and we believe this proposal is the perfect use for this type of site. We also believe that this type of development, the age-specific development, is only really achievable on sites like this, and they're not viable on mainstream housing sites. They can't really compete. Next slide. So as far as the planning application is concerned, it was a major application. There was substantial public consultation. All necessary supporting information was lodged with it. The PDH report confirms no objection from technical consultees. Developer obligations have been established to cover core paths, healthcare and community facilities. And we have met with Police Scotland. They've suggested originally it would be a gated community, but it won't, and they agree with that. And just for confirmation, Binghill House is to be used as part of development for admin, social and visitor use. As you've seen, there's a indicative layout produced and design concept to help illustrate the proposal. Officers have also suggested to us that an earlier concept is preferred, but both indicative layouts can achieve a quality and appropriate development that fit the site's context, location and respect the house. What it does do is it illustrates that there's a design solution for the site that the applicant is happy to explore. Next slide, please. Just touching on the public consultation, we did have an actual public consultation event when we could meet people back in June 2019. It was attended by over 100 people, 50 comments forms received in this, and the positive and negative comments were split roughly 50-50, but that was for a much larger site. The planning application does have letters of support as well as objections, and those who support it think that it's what the area and the city needs to support an ageing population, and those against generally don't want any more development or race-specific issues. They don't tend to question the need for more age-specific housing or indeed housing choice. The Community Council will be speaking later today, but we've had 3 iterations of responses from the Community Council, 2 in some detail, indicating that the community plan included a need for good quality retirement-friendly housing proposals. Low-rise housing was a welcome, that they would sit currently in the grounds of the house, and had some sympathy with the rezoning case. The latter response suggested 3 issues remaining: greenbelt and the scope of the 90-metre contour as well. But we don't believe that any of these issues are significant or can't be overcome. Next slide, please. So the 90-metre contour, just picking up on that specifically, there is no technical or policy basis for restricting development above the 90-metre contours. And actually, this slide shows all the areas of mill timber which are above the 90-metre contours, including the meadows, Binghill House, steading conversions, etc. So there's already development above the 90-metre contour, and it's not unusual here. Next slide. And in terms of green belt and green space network, we're aware that it's zoned as those, and always have been. But the basis of green belt policy is to maintain the distinct identity of the city, help avoid coalescence, maintain Aberdeen's landscape setting, and provide access to open space. In this case, we don't think any of these constraints really apply. The concept has been developed to reflect the site's distinct character and identity. The site's woodland boundaries and location will not form any coalescence. Aberdeen's landscape setting won't be affected, and proposals will actually open up the site to the community and provide better access to open space than is presently the case. On green space networks, these don't rule out development completely. They cover much of the city, including many of the newer zoned and master planned areas, some of the larger developments around the city, and they've got purposes set aside for them for these areas as well. But we believe this development could achieve those purposes. And the main element of this green space network, the woodland, is being retained and enhanced. You spoke about tree loss. The limited tree loss will be replaced by new woodland planting, increasing the age diversity of the woodland and enhancing local biodiversity. So, although currently zoned as green belt and green space network, the basic principles behind these policies can be achieved by this development. Next slide. I'll hand over to Stephen Barker.
Thank you. I just had to get my microphone switched on there. I'll put it back on the slides. Hopefully you can hear me. So the vision for Binghill House is to create a high quality active retirement community where people can enjoy their surroundings, retain independent active lifestyles and have access to discreet support that they may need in their later years. When we started looking at this idea, we really found that there was very little of a similar kind of aspiration in Scotland. The examples that we've looked at are mainly in the south of England, and what seems to unite them is the fact that most of these very successful retirement villages, have a historic building at their heart, which gives the scheme or the village real identity. Beautiful landscape settings, but also sympathetically designed cottages and apartments for older folks, such as in the photograph. There were several examples of this in very sensitive locations in the Cotswolds, around Oxford and the south of England, where again planning applications had to take all of these considerations into to be considered. Again, sites that maybe would not have been acceptable for normal standard residential developments have turned out to be beautiful retirement villages. And again, as I said, most of them having historic buildings and new build side by side, where the new build has been designed in a very sensitive manner to fit in with the historic buildings. Closer to home, there is one example in Inchmarlow, where there is a retirement community there. And again, it very much follows that principle of an existing historic building, beautiful landscape grounds, and carefully designed new properties, all creating this lovely retirement village where people very much like to live at. So as we looked at the site at Binghill House, we saw that most of the ingredients were in place, if not all of them. A beautiful historic building at the heart of it, at the top of the site there, a mature landscape setting, a large open south-facing garden with large specimen trees within it. It's already part of an established community in Miltimber, and also very importantly, many older folks in the Miltimber area who would be looking to downsize if possible, and ideally remaining in Miltimber, and there not being anywhere for them to really do that at the moment. So as we started looking at the design concept and how it might actually look, very much at the heart at the beginning was Binghill House being at the centre of the development, the mature woodland being retained, the front garden being the area that is developed with the majority of the trees being retained, A residential care home being created, as we noted, about 20 bedrooms, so just a small care home. But the main things in it that would make this maybe different to just a normal care home would be that it would actually be a village with a centre, with a shop, with a cafe, with a village green, allotments, etc. And that the majority of the residents would stay in retirement apartments and cottages, depending on whether or not they wanted to have the opportunity of a garden or if they would rather just live in an apartment. And importantly, the gardens opened up to the public and indeed to the residents to enjoy the beautiful setting, the south-facing slope looking towards the Deeside Valley and opening up new paths and gardens for everyone to enjoy, residents and indeed the local community. And we took that idea to the consultation event, and as was said earlier by Steve, there were many people there who were really interested in the concept of retirement living in Miltimber. There were also many people there who were concerned about the development to the north of there, particularly where they live at the moment. And we listened to the concerns. So this layout here compared to the last one is slightly different. What we have progressed with, following the views, taking on board the views of the community, was to try and move the properties north away from the boundary to the homes, the existing houses within Miltimber. Our earlier sketch, if you recall that, which we had previously, was to try and keep the development to the south of the site to give as much space as possible in front of the listed building. So the open space was really between Binghill House and the development being further south, and the properties being located towards the south was, as I said, causing concern. So we moved our concept around, went back to the drawing board and moved the village centre northwards away from the existing properties, still having Binghill House at the heart of the community, and still again retaining the mature woodland and the majority of the trees on the site, but revising the layout to allow for a more compact village centre next to Binghill House, which has advantages for the older folks who would live there, in that there's less of a distance for them to travel between the shop, the cafe, the care home, Binghill House, and it also leaves more open space to the south, to the gardens next to the adjacent properties. What we have now before you, and what, as Gavin has said, is an indicative layout, is a mixture of accommodation, retirement flats, a mixture of 1 and 2 bedroom retirement apartments, traditional maybe in appearance on the outside, but very modern in interior, which is what clearly discerning house buyers would be looking for, as well as the apartments, 1 and 2 bedroom single-storey cottages, with some 2-storey properties around about the village green, just to give it, a little bit more of a sense of place, more like a typical Deeside village. The new care home, again, over 2 stories just, and situated in the heart of the development, again designed to look like a traditional Deeside street and not as a big block. And then the facilities I mentioned, the community allotments, the on-site shop and cafe, and the public access. We prepared just a couple of visuals, a couple of indicative images as to what it might look like. And so this view here would be from the kind of front garden at the moment, looking up towards Binghill House. And again, indicatively showing the scale and massing of the properties. So on the left-hand side would be the care home. To the top left, you can maybe see the green frontage of the shop, and then on the right, the little cafe area with a new village green, and very much appropriate to the people who will be living there in the sort of sense of scale and community. And the wee cottages, again, just taken, they're indicative in early sketches, but again, you'll see there maybe the character of some of the Deeside villages as we head west from Aberdeen, of small properties with small gardens which are easily managed. I'll just hand over now to Norman.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. I'd like to talk briefly about the demand and supply of senior housing. As I'm sure you're aware, there are strong demand side pressures as we witness a significant demographic shift, with a growing percentage of the population in Scotland over 60, the legacy of the baby boom in the 1960s. Across Scotland, the changes are going to be very significant. By 2035, 30% of the population will be over 60. Presently, the figure is 23%. By 2039, 800,000 people will be aged 75 or over, a staggering 85% increase. Focusing in on Aberdeen, by 2039, it is projected that around 19% of the total population will be aged over 65. More specifically, in 2021, Cults, Bealside and Miltimber have a higher than average elderly population compared to the rest of Aberdeen City. When looking at the demographic change, we should also remember that as we age, the incidence of disability and illness increases. And thus, not only are we going to have more senior citizens, but we will have more seniors who will require specialised housing to meet their needs, whether it be the result of, say, a stroke or the impact of dementia. Next slide, please. You may be aware that the Planning Scotland Act 2019 introduces a duty for Scottish ministers to report on the housing needs of older people and disabled people. The focus will be on how the planning system is operating to ensure that new housing meets the needs of seniors and the disabled. This requirement is now embedded in legislation. Next slide, please. The supply of senior housing in Scotland is fragmented and mainly consists of residential flats and single-storey dwellings within mixed-age urban settings. Retirement villages are in fact very rare in Scotland. There are only 2 presently operating in Schmarlow in Aberdeenshire and Auchlochan in South Lanarkshire, and both are very popular. There are very few developers operating within the specialised retirement housing industry. McCarthy and Stone have circa 70% of the market across the UK, but are now much less active in Scotland. To date, evidence shows that house builders are predominantly building family housing, not age-specific housing, and often the design is not suitable for the elderly and expensive adaptations need to be made. As a consequence, seniors are having to buy family housing because of a lack of choice with respect to size, design and tenure, a very inefficient feature of our housing market. In my view, the development of Binghill House offers the chance to give the local community an exciting choice of housing type, suitable to serve the ageing population, accommodation built for seniors with all the latest technology embedded in the design to assist with care in the community. Next slide, please. I think I've made it perhaps clear that I think there is a demand and supply mismatch, but maybe my final point, an interesting statistic is that since 2010, one-person households have been the most common type in Scotland due to increasing number of older people living alone. This has resulted in an increasing prevalence of loneliness in the general community. Research evidence tells us that retirement communities help to prevent isolation and give residents a feeling of safety and security. There is no doubt in my mind that we need to start a national conversation on the need to build more senior housing, more people-centred housing, more adaptable and specialised housing to cater for the ageing population. Thank you. Shona.
Hello, I'd like to introduce myself. Excuse me. My name is Shona Byers, formerly Shona Donald. Over generations, the Donald family have been part of the local Multimber community and tried to help improve local amenities as much as we could by gifting land for the church and the community centre. And as a family, we are committed to protecting and enhancing the Deeside community. Sadly, 6 years ago, I lost both my parents within 3 months of each other. Thus, I inherited Binghill House and policies and the farming land surrounding it. I have managed to lease the house sporadically, but it has proved to not be economically viable. And I had to think of alternatives for the future. My idea to turn Binghill House and policies into an active retirement village arose from personal experience with my own parents. When my mum became ill, she needed constant care, but my dad was still very much active. My dad wanted to stay in Multimber, where he'd lived for most of his life, and there was nothing in the community to fulfill their needs. I started to research the area and there was a significant lack of bungalows in the area, which is what my dad needed at the time. I then contacted Halliday Fraser Munro for guidance on the way forward with my vision for Binghill. I clearly had a lot of other options with regard to Binghill House and the surrounding land, but I really wanted to follow in my dad's footsteps and find a way to choose something that would be an option that would benefit and enhance Miltimber. I myself grew up in Binghill House and enjoyed the lovely woods and parkland there all my life. And I'm eager for any future development to retain the parkland and the trees as much as possible. I have been closely involved in every stage of this planning. I've speaking to the community council and many people living in Miltimber throughout the whole process. I have listened to concerns and I have adjusted the plans to try and accommodate the local people. Over the last year or so, I have read many articles which seem to be encouraging a development such as I am suggesting, which for me was quite enlightening, that perhaps my vision for Binghill was actually being recognised as the right way forward for age-related living in Scotland. Unfortunately, this type of facility is far too late for my parents, but hopefully I would like to think it might be available for my generation. And certainly my intention is to continue my involvement with this development for the long term. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now have questions, members.
We do have a couple of conclusion slides, so we're able to speak to.
Okay.
I'll do it very quickly. I'll skim through them. Yeah. So basically, to finish off with, we think there are probably 4 key considerations here. One is about choice and need, and whether their city is planning well enough ahead to meet the housing need for its ageing population. The second one is whether the objections are substantive and whether they can be overcome, and we've talked about that. The third one is whether the proposal can be designed to meet the requirements of an ageing population, and we have suggested there are indicative layouts there that prove there are options for doing so. And the fourth one is whether it includes wider community benefits, and we think it does. It's public uses, it opens access, it's got a shop, cafe allotments, etc. And for the final slide, can you bring the final one? So we think the proposal will create a great place to live in a tranquil and established setting and support active lifestyles as people age. This village focus can foster community spirit, help tackle loneliness and isolation, all within the unique setting of Binghill House. People will enjoy living there. It can also help start to provide avenues for a choice of housing for this ageing population that doesn't exist at the moment and is unlikely to accept on unique sites such as this. The house has been part of Miltimber. Before Miltimber became what it is today, it should be part of its future. And we believe that the sensitive scale of the development and the type of housing proposed should be supported to help the city's ageing population to access quality homes in places they'd like to live, and with support there if they do require it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Crawford. If you could just drop down your presentation, thanks, Kurt. Members, questions. Saw Councillor Cormie's hand just as we went into final slides. Councillor Cormie.
Hello, thank you very much for your presentation, folks. I think I asked this the last time. I'm hearing that the gardens and the parkland will be open to the public, but the community allotments, would that be purely for the residents, or would that be the wider folk of Miltimber itself?
The allotments would be community allotments, so it would be open to the general public as well as the residents. So yes, the intention is that it's for the wider community.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Gregg.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that was a really interesting presentation. Many thanks. You mentioned that you would be catering to a range of abilities, including people with different mobility needs. I think independent living presumes that there will be people who will want to walk around the area, and whilst there's the provision of the shuttle bus, there is, I would have thought, likely to be people, active people in their older years wanting to walk around. So what provision is there for developing that walking network, the core path network, and so forth? It could be considered quite a distance to link up to the Deeside walkway, but have you been giving thought to that network of paths so that the residents have opportunities to walk around the area?
Yeah, the idea about the path network within the site is that it does link to all the potential opportunities outside the site. So down at North Deeside, across to the Deeside line, northwards, and to footpath networks to the east and to the west. So the idea would be that it does connect to all of those linkages, and that's the purpose of the footpath network within the site, to make sure that it does connect outside it. And there is also a developer obligations request to contribute towards the core path network as well. So yes, we have been thinking about it, and I think if the proposal moves forward, connection to those external footpaths and allowing people to have an active lifestyle who live there would be absolutely key to the whole part of it. We're also suggesting e-bikes. Now, we looking into the issue of e-bikes. One of the studies that we did find was that as people age, the ability to be able to cycle obviously reduces, but e-bikes help people access that facility much easier, and it's a popular activity as people get older. And e-bikes help. So the idea would be that those would be available on site as well, and obviously then we'd be thinking about connecting into wider networks for cycling and recreational cycling.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. I think that the e-bikes would help you get up Binghill Road, so that's good to hear. Could I ask my shuttle bus question here?
Yes, certainly.
Would that be a permanent service, or is it time limited?
I think the principle behind it is it's permanent. Mm-hmm. And it's not necessarily it's not there to be a time limited thing. It's the purpose of the shuttle bus is to allow people who live within the development to be able to access wider afield if they want to, and I think it's a permanent element to the whole proposal.
Good, thank you. I did have another question. Am I allowed?
Yes, carry on, Councillor.
Thanks. I wanted to ask about the historic house itself. And its relation to the care home. Would Binghill House function as entirely as a care home or as an HQ, or what's its role within the development, and how does it relate to the care home building?
The Binghill House itself is proposed to be retained as it is. It does have 6 bedrooms upstairs. It has a basement and a ground floor, and the idea is that the house would be used as an administrative social centre for the development, and the upper floors could be used for visitors' accommodation. So if people are coming to visit their relatives or whatever, there would be bedrooms potentially in there that would allow people to stay. And that's the kind of the key aim as far as the house is concerned, but it doesn't change the house. The house pretty much stays as it is. So in terms of relationship to the care home, it's right. In terms of the indicative layout, it's shown right beside it. So there would be a link somehow between those two, but the idea about a house is that it provides administrative office type space.
Thank you. I'm familiar with Inchmarlow House, so it sounds as if it's the same pattern as Inchmarlow House. So that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gregg. Councillor Copeland.
Thank you, Convener. This is maybe a wee bit tricky, but I'm going to ask it anyway. We've heard that you speak about the gardens for Binghill House, and we've heard Mrs. Donald speak about the policies. Now, are you arguing that this is not greenbelt land, this is a private residence's garden that you want to build in, as opposed to being on the green belt? Is that what you're arguing?
I think that's what we're saying. It's a garden. It's a house in its gardens. Binghill House and its gardens. That is one entity. So that is what we're saying. Yeah.
So you're basically saying you want to develop an existing residential property.
Yeah, it's an existing. It's a house which is in residential use, and it has been all its life. And the proposed use is for residential. So yeah, that is what we're saying. Is that it is the use. It is a use that the site is currently being used for. And you've heard, Gavin talk about the scale, etc., in terms of the greenbelt policy. But principally, that is what we're saying. It's a house at the edge of an existing community that's been part of it forever. And what we're proposing is a new form of residential use within the gardens of that house.
Fine, thanks very much. Thanks for clarifying that.
Councillor Malik.
Thanks very much. Excuse me. Can I ask a question to Steve? Who will pay for the shuttle bus? As you said, it will be permanent.
It'll depend on how the operator operates, I suppose. But it would be the operator would fund it, I'm assuming. And it could be paid for. It depends, I suppose, on the whole financial setup of that proposal. So I couldn't give you an exact answer for it, but that's probably how it would work.
Okay, can I ask another one? So
Certainly.
Reside there, they will not be burdened on extra costs. So the developer or the whoever is managing, they will pay themselves then, yeah.
Well, it'll be funded through that process. The cost of how that would work at the end of the day, I couldn't be sure at the moment. Give an exact date.
It will be processed then.
Sorry, Councillor Malik, don't repeat that.
Yeah, what will be processed then? If you said that it will be according to the process. So what will be processed? Can you explain us?
So the next bit of the process, so the detailed part of the process, and if this application was approved, then the detailed element of it, the MSC applications that would go along with it, would be alongside an operator, and that operator would then be able to confirm how all that would work. So that's where that information would come from in more detail.
Thanks very much. Can I ask one more, last one?
Certainly, of course, Councillor McKell.
Yeah, Inchmarlow development you mentioned a few times. Yes, I know it's really nice one. I like it myself. But what is the public transport accessibility is only about maybe less than 400 meters or 300 meters bus stop from this development?
From Inchmarlow?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Is anyone else on the team sure of how close the bus services are?
No. I think what it does, all of the examples that we looked at had a private sort of taxi shuttle service for residents of the care home in particular, who clearly won't have their own cars. And that's very common. Even in Aberdeen, a number of the care homes have private vehicles that they use for taking their residents to appointments and various things. The added beauty of having the apartments and the cottages is that there's a wider number of people who could take the benefit of the shuttle bus or the private taxi, and that's exactly what happens at Inchmarlow as well. Clearly, as you say, there is the Deeside bus travels past the Inchmarlow site in the same way that we've got the bus service on North Deeside Road. So there are similarities.
Councillor Malik, have you any further questions?
That's fine. Thanks very much.
Councillor Copeland, I saw your hand go up again. Was that a mistake?
No, it's okay. I was going to ask something, but I won't. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. Have we got any further questions? I have a couple myself. No, okay. Can I just ask, we heard active repeated several times. Can I ask, obviously, most 60-year-olds that I know and probably would be attracted to this development would probably have their own car. So what's the car parking arrangements being considered for around the development?
Stephen, are you able to?
Yeah, well, what we're showing is parking provision in line with the council's parking standards. So the cottages and apartments are 2-bed, 1 and 2 bed. So again, the parking we're looking to meet the parking standards, and for each of the cottages to have in curtilage parking for folks' cars. The apartments, which are maybe more around the village square, again, as Gavin said at the beginning, it's indicative, but there would be some parking around the back. And then the care home provision would be, again, in line with the parking standard for care home, which is more about staffing and visitor parking. Certainly, we would very much see electric car use as being very charging points being part of the development, and clearly by the time if this was successful and was built, by that time there would be far more EVs on the road, and we would certainly see that there would be provision for that in all of the properties as well across the development.
Okay. Mr. Crawford made reference to depending who the operator was. So is the suggestion that the houses and the nursing home would be sold to one operator, or is the intention to sell the plots for the houses separately, or what's the kind of setup idea?
The idea, setup idea, is that it would be a single development operated by a single operator. In terms of people be able to purchase or lease properties, I think that, it's probably an element of choice, and I think there may be both on that site. I'm not sure, Norman, you want to say any more about this, but I mean, we've been speaking about this ourselves recently about that actually, as people age, the choice of being able to rent or buy is important, but different depending on your circumstances. But the principle would definitely be that it would be a single operator running the whole development.
Steve, if I could maybe just come in on that point about purchase or rental. We did a survey last year on seniors across Scotland, and one of the interesting findings was that seniors in their 70s actually were more interested in leasing rather than buying. They realised perhaps their life expectancy wasn't as long, and they didn't necessarily see the option of buying as something that was very sensible, considering the costs of buying and selling it in the future. So actually a scheme with an option to lease might well be very popular for those who, the more elderly seniors actually might prefer to lease.
Okay. Can I just ask then on the in terms of, so I suppose we're looking at kind of a similar McCarthy Stone, but with cottages as opposed to the flatted properties to what we normally see on offer. In terms of previously, when you came to the predetermination, the pre-application forum, there was discussions about providing medical facilities to those living there on site. But I'm assuming that it's only now going to be those in the care home as opposed to giving a GP service, for instance, to the other residents. So the question would be, if that is the case, have you made contact with cults and future medical practices to see obviously about taking additional patients?
You're right. I mean, at the pre-application forum, there was discussions around what type of medical facility provide on site, and at that time, I think we were saying that the thought process was around, yes, let's try and provide that on site. It could be that actually Binghill House is one of could facilitate that as part of it, but I don't think it's necessarily for the care home residents, because the point about the whole development is that people can live in their own homes for as long as they possibly can, with care provided to them in a discreet manner. So they don't necessarily have to, be in a care home to have that care. And I suppose that the idea would be that it would be that type of healthcare provided across for everyone who is there. In terms of contacting the GP practices, we have contacted them a couple of times, but we haven't had a response from them, unfortunately. So obviously they've been busy, so it's not been an easy time for them. But we've not had a response. We have tried to speak to them about it, and there is again, developer obligations does set aside a sum of money to help with that facility. But the idea would be that there would be something on site. I'm not sure, Shona, whether you want to add anything to that.
Yes, this is something that I would like to look into, because Binghill House is perfect. The basement could actually be adapted if there was a possibility, if Cults or Cooter wanted to maybe have a GP there that could go one day a week, or a nurse or some. I don't know if that's something we could quite open to look into that further. Which would maybe be available not only for the retirement village, but for the local people as well, which would free up. So I know how busy Cults and Cooter medical practices are, so that is an option, which I think might be quite an interesting one to explore.
Yes, thank you. Just a couple more questions. To pick up the point that Councillor Gregg raised around the shuttle buses. Now, again, there was a suggestion that you're going to look to an operator. Has there been any discussions with any of the bus services or bus companies in interest of running that service? Just that I know that we've tried doing similar things along the Rodee side and not been very successful because of the cost.
I no is the answer, because there's two reasons probably for that. One is that our discussions with bus services on other projects have been not very fruitful in terms of making that happen. But also we're not sure whether actually Binghill Road is suitable for that type of facility, and it'd be better if it was something which was smaller and more suited to the development that's being proposed. So not a bus necessarily, maybe a minibus rather than a bus. So there has been no discussions just for that reason, really, that actually we don't think it's necessarily a practical solution to it.
Okay, thanks. Final question, you'll be glad to hear. Obviously, staffing for the nursing home, most of those members of staff, because I see them at the bus stop for Tornadee, come by bus. Now, I'm not very good with measurements. You'll probably know how far it is from the bus stop all the way up to Binghill House. What consideration has been given to that? Because that is a fair distance for somebody to have to walk that has no other forms of transport. So what's your plans for staffing?
It is, I mean, it's a little bit further than the school. So I guess it's the same issues that the school will have with, staff that are coming by public transport. So I mean, the main, there is a footpath obviously all the way up from North East Side Road. The idea of the kind of concierge private minibus would be that it would be available as well it's going to be running around, giving guests lifts. It could easily be providing, taking staff up and down to North East Side Road at kind of beginning and end of shifts. I don't see an issue in that, but we are seeing it as not, although yes, it's a bit of a bray to walk up from North East Side Road, but it isn't we feel too far a distance for somebody to walk.
And I think just looking at your roads consultation response, that's what that reflects as well. It basically identifies that yes, it's a bit further, but for staff purposes, it's deemed to be reasonable.
I think he said it was out with the normal distance of stuff actually. But that's fine. Okay, thank you. Councillor Copeland, sorry, I noticed your hand again.
Yeah, thanks, Camilla. I'm just triggered with something you said, but Mr. Crawford, you said that you'd changed your plans and moved everything up a bit. Does that result in the loss of more trees?
Well, as that, Steve, yeah, we potentially maybe some more trees. What we really want to do, and it's been done in many places, is a development that actually is built around about the trees. I think Nigel Astle, our tree consultants, may be on the call, but we very firmly believe that we can build sensitively in this mature setting, and actually these trees will be one of the reasons people choose to live here. It's certainly not a kind of a bulldozer approach to the site to clear the site to create a big, huge area for building houses. It'll be about positioning the properties and as close as we can without impacting on the trees' roots and their long-term health. But the move maybe up the hill, as you described it there, Councillor Copeland, it was really for the benefit of the neighbours to the south who have got concerns about the proximity of these new properties to their properties. And I would suggest probably by moving further up the hill, there might be some more impact on the trees.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Convener.
Okay, thanks. I think that's all the questions. I'm not seeing any further hands. Now, I'd like to suggest maybe a 5-minute comfort break just before we go into the second round of presentation. So if we could all be back for 11:05, and that'll give any time that need to. If you could all switch your mics off if you disappear for a few minutes.
So just to confirm that the recording will continue, so if you can switch off your cameras and microphones, please.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm hoping we're all here. Lindsay, I'll get you to just do a quick roll call to make sure all members are back.
No problem. Thank you, convener. If you can just indicate for the recording again that you're present. So, convener.
Here.
Councillor Allen.
Here.
Councillor Cook.
Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Copeland.
Here.
Councillor Cormie.
Yeah.
Councillor Gregg.
Here.
Councillor Mackenzie. Councillor Mackenzie. Okay, Councillor Malik.
Here.
Thank you. And I'll just check that we've got the external people as well. So we've got Colin from the Cults Fieldside Community Council.
Yeah.
Thank you. I've got Bruce Anderson.
Here.
Thank
Here.
you. Caroline, are you on the call?
Yes.
Thank you. And Stuart Jackson.
Still here, yeah.
Perfect, thank you. So we're all good to go.
Could we just check Councillor Mackenzie's here?
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Mackenzie, are you on the call? I think she's dropped out. I'll just try and join her back in.
Okay, thank you, Lindsay. We'll just be one moment and we'll...
Do we mute the mics again, Lindsay?
Yes, please. Once the convener confirms it's your turn, you can turn it on. Convener, I've just called Councillor Mackenzie, so she's lost connection, but she's just trying to get back in. So it's up to you if you want to proceed or hold off.
I'll just give it 1 minute just so that she can get back on if we can see her.
Okay.
Thank you. Any sign of her, Lindsay?
No. I keep trying to dial her in, but it's not working. I'll try once more.
Okay, thanks.
No, it's still not working, sorry.
Okay, well, we'll just crack on and hopefully she'll
she can join us.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you very much, Lindsay. Okay, we're resuming and we're now on to statutory consultees, which is the Cults Fieldside and Multimber Community Council. And we've got Mr. Colin Morsley. Colin, if I could hand over to you. You have 10 minutes.
Convener, I'm just bringing myself up.
Thanks.
Okay.
Yes, my name's Colin Morsley. Good morning, everybody. I'm Planning Liaison Officer for Cults, Fieldside and Mill Timber Community Council. We've given this application careful consideration over many months. The context we have is major ongoing construction to the east and the west of Mill Timber Settlement, and the threat of development to the south if a current appeal succeeds. And I think you saw from the photo, the slides that Gavin put up earlier, how all that fits together. We've had extensive discussions with local residents and with the applicants. We finally decided to object to the application on the grounds that the application is a departure from both the ALDP 2017 and the proposed ALDP 2020. It's zoned as Green Belt and Green Space Network in both of these plans. It lies above the generally recognised 95-metre contour, below which most lower D-side settlements are situated, although as I think Halliday Fraser Munro showed us, there are settlements above that. And finally, our decision supports and respects the views of a significant slice of the neighbouring community, and they're naturally concerned about maintaining their current level of amenity. The various detailed objections have been covered partly by the planning officer's report to committee, and I know that others will wish to speak to them this morning. And finally, to conclude, our community plan encourages the provision of suitable retirement-friendly housing in Lower Deeside. We want to enable a choice of opportunities for older residents to downsize as appropriate to their circumstances. I did promise Lindsay I'd be brief, so thank you very much. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Colin. Any questions for the Community Council? I'm not seeing any hands. Okay. Oh, no, sorry, Councillor Gregg. Apologies.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to ask if the Community Council had expressed any views about the provision of the proposed cafe and allotments and so forth. Did they have a view as to whether these would be welcome enhancements to local services or not?
Well, certainly in our discussions, I think we saw that as I mean, particularly those of us who, you know, were not outright objectors, saw that as interesting and something we would have liked. I think one of our letters to Gavin Clark said that we would have liked to have seen some of the issues like that being taken forward in a more detailed application. At the moment, the only cafe facility in Mill Timber is within the church, Cafe 1 in the Deeside Christian Fellowship Church. Of course, there's this provision within the Old Fold development for so-called mixed-use community facilities, which I think they've been marketed for about getting on for 2 years now, and so far no takers. So otherwise, there isn't really anything else in Mill Timber.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Many thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Craig. Any other questions? No, I'm not seeing any. Okay, thank you very much, Colin. We'll move on to the other representatives. First up we have is Bruce Anderson. Mr. Anderson, if you would like to give us your presentation, thank you.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. I'm one of 5 people in our little cul-de-sac here on the edge of this development, and I speak on behalf of all 5. But I also like to think I speak on behalf of the nearly 150 people who objected to this development. They objected after the consultation meeting, after they saw the detail. I think the developer was saying it was 50-50. Well, there was 150 people in the local community, and that's a lot of people who've put their names forward. There's only 5 people in the whole of the MBC catchment area who've supported this development. So that's the background. I think you'll have seen from Mr. Clark's statement that there were 13 supporting statements for the development and 84 statements against the development. So an overwhelming number of people in the community against this development. You've also heard from the Community Council, after considerable discussion and debate of which I was party to, they have stood up and said they're against this development. So I think that's a major statement, because they were inundated from both sides in the discussion. But it's not just about numbers, and it's not just about the weight of the argument. It's about principle. And I've been through the local plan, and sometimes I thought, has the developer read this plan? Because all the principles and provisions within the plan, most of them have been ignored, totally ignored. And I think that's important. It's not just a significant departure, it's a major departure from the plan. And that's so important. If you're going to depart from the plan, you have to have material considerations. Now, the only material considerations I've heard in the past or today is lack of housing for older people. Now, government policy is that people should be helped to stay at home for as long as possible. If you need specialist housing, there's a range of specialist housing in the neighbourhood. At this point in time, there's about over 40 apartments on the market available. So there's not a lack of supply. In fact, in the CHAP construction, the Woodgrove construction, they didn't go ahead with the last phase of the development because of lack of demand. So there's a balancing act. What we would suggest as a neighbourhood, and this was supported by the Community Council, is that if this kind of provision or if more provision is required for older people, it's provided in the current, and this is subject to the council agreeing, the current primary school site, which is a brownfield site and is favoured in the plan. Okay, the major thing is that it's totally contrary to the green belt provisions, and if granted, would create a huge precedent. I think it has to be remembered that this development initially, way back, was for 90 mainstream houses plus the retirement village. So if this development is agreed, then we're talking about it opens up the possibility of the developer coming back and looking for those 90 mainstream housing again in the green belt. Earlier on, I think someone mentioned the house and the garden. The garden in front of the house is very small. The majority of what's been developed here are fields where the Donalds used to graze their donkeys. So it's not garden ground, they're fields. Just going on to trees, there were 17 trees cut down prior to the application going in. And I said to my wife, what's happening here? Somebody is about to apply an application. And what came in? An application. We later asked, why did you cut these 17 trees down prior to the consultation meeting? We were told it was to protect dog walkers. There's never been dog walkers in this part of the Binghill estate. They're now, according to my reckoning, there's 28 additional trees. So that's in addition to the 17, there's 28 additional trees. So that's a total of 45. These are not scrub kind of coniferous trees. These are beautiful deciduous trees that they want to take down. I have to say, this village model of care, it's totally contrary to our thinking in this country. I was the director responsible for the elderly services in Grampian and wrote the strategy along with housing and social work. And the whole principle was the elderly should be integrated into their community. They shouldn't be isolated. And in terms of the site, it's an isolated site up the top of a very steep hill, and it's this winter it's been icy and wind. It's a terrible site to put elderly people. It will also be. I think despite what the developers said about the police, I haven't seen anything in writing from the police, but their initial report was, in essence, they were looking for a gated community. So they weren't looking for integration with the local community. They were looking for a gated community. So it's on top of a remote site. All the existing sheltered houses and nursing homes are within 5 to 10 minutes walk.
Sorry, Bruce, that's just your time up.
Oh, right, okay.
Can I just finish that last bit?
I think the developer got another 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Can I finish?
The last bit you were saying, Bruce.
All the existing sheltered houses or houses or nursing homes, they're all within 5 or 10 minutes walk. There's a huge problem in recruiting to nursing homes right across the country. And if you stick a nursing home up at the top of a very remote site, how are you going to be able to recruit if they have to, get off the bus and walk up a very steep hill? Am I allowed any more time, or is that it?
I think we'll see what your colleagues have to say, and it may come out in questioning, I'm sure.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Carolyn Anand. Bruce, could you pop your mic off and your camera just for now? Thank you. Okay.
Hello. Do I start now? Yes.
Yeah, you start now. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Carolyn, and I'm actually sitting with the background of Binghill House grounds behind me. I'm a 61-year-old active retiree and I own an e-bike, so I'm just the target population that this development proposal has been aimed at, and yet I'm strongly opposed to it, and it's for a number of reasons. One of the reasons for diverting from the local development plan that were given very early on was a lack of housing supply. Well, in actual fact, this is not the case with this proposal. Currently, as of Friday, there were 43 residential properties for sale on the West End and the Deeside corridor of Aberdeen City. 31 are between Cults and Multimber. There is also the potential to expand the development at Woodland Grove in Multimber. Now, Woodland Grove is a beautiful old building with beautiful mature grounds, just as we were being portrayed earlier about Binghill House. The developers have not pursued this due to insufficient interest. Also, within the West End corridor and the Deeside corridor of Aberdeen City, we are very well catered for nursing homes. We have 8 in total. There's also the potential to further expand Tornadee should there be a requirement. There is simply no evidence that further nursing home provision is required. The second reason for objection is the practicality of the proposed site. Within the Aberdeen Local Development Plan, there are very clear guidelines set around developments aimed at the changing age profile of our city. And these advocate integrated developments well connected to local facilities, communities and public transport links. This site is unsuitable for this development. The distance from public transport, the nearest bus stop is over 1 kilometre away, and that is from the junction to the development, not right up to the top end of the development. The site is at the top of a very steep hill. It is also detached from the local community, and there are no local amenities. And this is in direct contrast to the suburb of Cults, which is quite nearby, where there is a medical centre, pharmacies, library, post office, sports complex, community hub, local shops, hairdressers, and coffee shops. And within Cults, there are currently 24 retirement properties for sale. And that's an area that fully meets the criteria set out in the age-specific components of the Aberdeen Local Development Plan. There is an alternative solution. If, after consultation with local residents and gathering sufficient evidence, it was concluded further residential properties were necessary, then an alternative, significantly more appropriate site is available on the existing Maltimber Primary School. It has already been identified as a brownfield site, and this site is already developed. It is integrated right within the heart of the local community. It direct.
Oops, Caroline, we've lost you slightly. Lindsay, can you get Caroline?
I'm just paused.
Oh, Caroline, you stopped briefly. So the last.
Am I back again?
Yeah, you're back now. So you just said, I think your last thing was that the school site was integrated into the community.
Okay. It's also directly linked to public transport on the North Deeside Road by a very short path. Therefore, there's no requirements for a shuttle bus. Therefore, it is a sustainable service to get to the bus stop. It's easily accessible and it's not at the top of a very long steep hill. The site where Binghill, the current Binghill Maltimber Primary School is, would not support overdevelopment because it's actually surrounded by low height housing all around it. And therefore that cottage type that's been suggested would actually be quite appropriate for there. There's also drainage issues associated with Maltimber Primary School, in which case there would require to be green space incorporated within it. That site would also avoid heavy construction traffic around the new Maltimber Primary School. And it would also prevent the environmental erosion associated with the Binghill House grounds. The site is owned by Aberdeen City Council and therefore can be planned in accordance with local needs and local priorities. And the regeneration of existing brownfield sites are encouraged and favoured within the local development plan, both 2017 and 2020. So aside from the points already covered, there are significant environmental impacts with this, with the proposal. The removal of large mature trees and the building of the development itself will cause irreparable damage to the local wildlife habitats. The area is home to native species of plants and animals, including red kites, red squirrels, badgers, pine martens, woodpeckers and owls. The local wildlife has already faced significant erosion of their habitat through the removal of the hundreds of metres of hedgerows and dry stone dikes on Binghill Road. And that first picture that you were shown of Binghill Road prior to the school development, that hedgerow no longer exists. It has all been removed by Robertson's construction and Cala construction. So any development that further exacerbates this trajectory should be rejected. Trees are an essential fight against climate change due to their carbon absorption. The UK needs to plant about 1.5 billion trees to meet its net zero pledge by 2020. The last thing we should be doing is cutting down more. 17 were cut down prior to this application. It has been proposed that additional trees and shrubs will be planted for every tree cut down. This ignores the immediate devastating impact on local wildlife from having the habitat removed. It also does not address the fact that old trees absorb and store more carbon than younger trees. The Aberdeen Local Development Plan clearly states that development should not result in the loss of or damage to trees and woodlands. It also states that developments must demonstrate that they safeguard or enhance biodiversity and protect the species. Nothing that has been presented today or in favour of this application is compliant with either of these. There is concern about the access road also. The access junction is very close to the entrance of the new primary school in Binghill Road. It poses a safety risk with traffic from the development entering onto existing housing estate. And also a concern is the potential for heavy construction traffic, which I can tell you from experience starts at 7 AM in the morning to 6 PM, going back and forth around a primary school, day in and day out whilst the development is built. The proposal, of course, also opens up the potential for even more development around Maltimber.
Sorry, Caroline, that's your time up.
Okay, I've just got my closing paragraph. Is that okay? Yeah. Because I had a blip. Yeah, the planning application has been very negatively received by most residents of Maltimber to an extent that nearly 150 wrote an objection, and the community council are strongly aware of our feelings. Proportionately, very, very few vote in favour of the proposed development, and interestingly, the flurry of support came after the deadline for raising concerns or approval. And and very few were actually from within Aberdeen city itself. We're talking about places like Edinburgh, Chapel of Geary, Aboyne and Torpins for support for this proposal. So there was only one person in Miltimber supported this proposal. So I'm asking to please reject it. It's not required. It goes against many factors outlined in the Aberdeen Local Development Plan related to meeting local needs, green space, the environment and age-specific provision.
Okay, thank you very much, Caroline. Final speaker today is Stuart Jackson.
That's me, I think.
Okay,
you
you're on.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Thanks very much to everybody for the presentations. I've enjoyed it, whether I agreed with it or not. All very professionally done. Just to give you a little bit of background, I've stayed in Miltimber for the last 25 years, and my wife and myself have family connections with Miltimber, my parent, my father-in-law, etc., going back 45 years. Indeed, I used to work with John Hislop, who was one of the tenants at Binghill House many years ago. Now, it's difficult not to go over everything that's already been said. Stole my thunder a little bit, and I hope Colin will give me a bit of credit for the Miltimber Primary School proposal many months ago. But just to go over the planning application again, just to reiterate what both Bruce and Caroline said. There was 147 objections and 24 notes of support. I'll just reiterate what Caroline said. 19 of those came from out with the immediate Miltimber, Beelside, Cults area. Indeed, one came from Edinburgh, 2 came from the same household, and I believe one from Nigel Astle, who was a consultant, may well have been miscalculated or miscategorised as support when indeed it was a neutral comment. I was pleased to see that after the public consultation which I attended, that the planning application was modified to reflect some of the comments that they got back from that, to make it a bit less objectionable and a bit more, how could I say, in line with some of the comments that were submitted. But the long and the short of it all, as far as the planning application is concerned, is that it's clearly contrary to the 2017 and 2020 approved local development plans, and also the objections of many of the local residents, and I do not believe it should be considered any further, and we should allow Mrs. Byers to save some of her money, and she has been great to the village, I don't deny that, but I don't think we should allow this to go any further. I'd like to talk about some of the issues that Professor Hutchison raised. And again, they've been touched on before, but there is no evidence of any immediate or long-term requirement for additional retirement housing here in the Deeside area. As has been pointed out, Tornadee Woodlands Grove development has got at the current time 8 vacant properties. That's 8 out of 69, yeah? It must maybe worth commenting that this development took 12 years to complete, with the final property only being sold at Q4 last year. Phase 4 has now been put on hold by the developer, and it must be worth noting that this area of Phase 4 is 1.25 acres in footprint. So that's a substantial amount of land that could be developed in the event we require either additional nursing home facilities or indeed retirement flats in the Miltimber area. Notwithstanding Miltimber, if we look in the more immediate area, there's over 100 retirement homes being built in the old Rob Roy Caravan Park on Peter Cooter on Malcolm Road. And we have a reasonably mature development being proposed on Inchgarth Road at the Pitfoddle stroke Cults interface. So there are going to be developments to support Professor Peter Hutchison's assumptions. There's over 50 houses in the immediate Aberdeen area, and as we've talked about as well, there's the Inchmarlow Village, which at the moment has 8 houses and 7 flats available for sale. Beautiful place. I've looked at it myself. My wife's not so keen because it is, quote, remote and not in a community. So I do not believe that the current proposal for Binghill House, should I say, is actually attractive. There's mention of a local shop and a cafe. We've already heard from Colin that there is a cafe in the community church. I know enough about Mill Timber to know that we not only had one shop in Mill Timber which failed. That shop was on the corner of Contwall Brae, Contwall Road. It included a sub post office. It's now 2 detached houses. The shop was then moved to the property which is across from the entrance into the sports club. Gosh, I can't remember it now, on North Deeside Road there. Again, it was a shop come sub post office, and it again closed due to lack of business. So I cannot think that there is a demonstrable need for a shop or a small shop within the Mill Timber area. Something that was built in the Binghill House development would undoubtedly fail very, very quickly. Notwithstanding, again, Cala Homes have currently got an approved proposal to build houses on Binghill Road below the primary school entrance, etc. So if there is a need for a coffee shop or a little local store, or indeed a hairdresser's, etc., there will be provision within Mill Timber to build that on Binghill Road, and I'll re-emphasise, it is below the primary school. I was really pleased to hear Caroline highlight the issues on Binghill Road. We stay on Binghill Crescent. Our house backs onto houses on Binghill Road, and she's absolutely right. It's rattle bang rattle from 7 a.m. in the morning till 6 p.m. in the evening. And indeed, the previous weekend, there was traffic on Saturday and Sunday. And I'd be confident that was wholly contrary to the planning and building permissions that were given. But Robertson's, in their speed and in their haste to get the primary school finished, and I'm all behind that, have been working basically almost 24/7 on that site.
Sorry,
So,
Stuart, that's your time up.
Can I not get some of Colin's 10 minutes that you didn't use?
If you've got a couple more lines.
A couple more lines. Okay, well, my main concern, I'm all against the development from the point of view of its distance from the main road, but my main concern is the continued disturbance to the residents of Binghill Road. We had 12 years with the lower part portion being subject to traffic going into the Tornadee development. We've now got, since 2019, we've got Cala Homes going up and down there 7 days a week with transport, heavy transport, goods, etc., to their development, which they now access from Binghill Road as opposed to their main entrance. We've now got the school going on, which will be finished by the end of this year, and thank goodness it's going to be an excellent addition to the village. But again, there's construction traffic going up and down there. And if we go back to my point earlier about the 12 years to develop the Tornadee Hospital into retirement homes, can we really impose a further 12 years, that's into the following decade, of construction traffic going up and down Binghill Road on the good residents of that area? It quite honestly is beyond the Aberdeen Council and the Mill Timber Community Council to allow this to go on. I really can't go on. I can't say any more. Yeah, it's just crazy, absolutely crazy. Finally, I'd say in closing, I'm all behind the discussions to further investigate the development of the Mill Timber Primary School vacant site, OP43. I believe it is an ideal opportunity. It's an ideal opportunity to provide age-specific retirement housing in Mill Timber, which will be low carbon, affordable, and that's very important, affordable, because let's be honest, the development out at Inchmarlow is not necessarily affordable to all people who would be selling a semi-detached house in Mill Timber.
Sure, I'm going to have to draw you to a close.
And that would, well, anyway, so thank you very much for your time. Let's
take questions.
Let you questions if they want to, yeah.
Bruce, we're coming to questions, so I'm sure at any point you'll be able to make a question. Members, questions for any of our three speakers. Councillor Greig.
Yes, thank you, convener. I'd like to ask Mr. Anderson if he's got anything to add.
There's
thank you, Councillor Greig.
Well, I would just add the pressure, no wonder the developer hasn't had any reply from the true practices, because they're under severe pressure. This was not just with COVID, but before COVID. This development will have 60 elderly people, or potentially 120 elderly people. But more importantly, they'll have 20 very dependent patients in the nursing home. And that's going to put severe pressure on already overstretched practices. The other thing to say is I don't think anyone's mentioned yet the listing of Binghill House. Now, Binghill House is listed as a Category C building, and this development is going to stretch out in front of it, so completely ruin the view from the Category C listed building. The lady, the developer, applied for planning permission back in 2014 for apartments. I don't know if it was 2 or 3 apartments. Why? And that was granted, but it's now lapsed. Why did she not go ahead if she was so keen to preserve Binghill House as an entity? Why did she not go ahead with that development? It's a big question. Thank you, convener.
Thank you. Councillor Gregg, have you any other questions?
No, many thanks. That's helpful.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Cook, have to see your hand.
Thank you, convener. Carolyn Allen mentioned that there were drainage issues on the proposed school site. I wonder if we get just a wee bit more detail on that. And also, actually got another one, but if you want to take that one first. Yeah, so, yeah, what are the drainage issues?
Hello, yes, the school site's quite well known locally for flooding regularly. In fact, just within the last few months, Aberdeen City Council have been digging trenches and trying to divert parts of the burn that runs down the side of Multimber Primary School. So it's certainly not suitable for heavy. The existing playing fields, there's 2 parts. There's the school, there's Multimber School, and it's been developed over the years with little bits added on as the school roll has increased. But there's a huge playing field area. So it's the playing fields that have a tendency to get very, very boggy. And many years ago, when my children were at primary school and I was on the school PTA, we had activities where we were trying to create like a woodland garden at the foot of Multimber Primary School grounds, and we were planting willow trees to try and help with the flooding at that time.
Thanks for that clarification. And the other one is maybe one where maybe officers could come in. I think, 2 of the speakers have mentioned that there've been 17 trees cut down already, and those 17 trees would be in addition to the 22 trees that would be felled for the construction. Can I just get some clarification that there have already been 17 trees cut down?
If the trees were cut down, they weren't protected. So prior to the submission of the application, there would have been no consent required from the council to remove those trees because they weren't covered by TPO.
It's more the principle involved rather than the consent.
But
sorry,
notwithstanding the fact that there's no TPO on them, we do believe that 17 trees have already been cut down. Yeah.
I mean, that's the allegation that came forward, and obviously shared by the objectors there. So yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks. I think that's be done there.
You can clearly see the space where trees did occupy. That's evidence. That's evidence now. Yeah.
Thanks.
Am I allowed to defend myself in these allegations?
No, sorry, I can't bring you back in. No, sorry.
Okay. No problem.
Okay. Councillor Gregg.
Thank you. I've got 2 questions for officers. Is this the time to put them?
Yeah, you can.
Okay, thank you, convener. The first one is to ask about road safety and congestion as discussed on Binghill Road. Would there be a traffic survey, a transport assessment for Binghill Road, which would take into account the construction phase and the permanent or long-term impacts of developments, including the school? Thank you.
I'll let my colleague Michael Cowie answer that one, just from roads.
Hi there, Councillor. In regard to that, the only assessment that's been made so far is based on the actual vehicles which we associated with the development. So that has not taken into consideration the construction, but they would require to provide that information as part of an MSC application as well, of how the programme that works.
Yeah, thank you. But if there's a planning application in due course, would that not include an evaluation of traffic impacts on that road in particular and the wider area?
Yeah, we can certainly request that information and ask for assessments, or we could request surveys to detail the nature and the size of vehicles that are already occupying that road, which would be utilising for the primary school construction and development at the north side of Old Full development.
Okay. Thank you. I'm just asking that for information.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Gregg, I think Mr Anderson would like to contribute to that part of the discussion. So given it's their time for questions, I'm quite happy to have a mixed offering for you.
I think the problem is that the junction coming round from Old Fold is already a very difficult junction, and there have been a number of near misses on that junction. If you put in a further junction just down from it, and then you've got the school just down from it, the problem is with the school will be drop-offs. And if you ever see the drop-offs in Miltimber Primary, cars will be parked right up to to that junction with drop-offs. Now, somebody has said, oh, the level of traffic coming out of this proposed site will be light. It won't be light because there'll be tradesmen, there'll be service vehicles, there'll be staff, etc., etc. So it's not light traffic onto this new junction. Sorry, thank you, convener. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Anderson. Councillor Gregg, next question.
Yes, thank you for that. The next question was for officers. There was mention of concerns about precedent that would perhaps encourage or allow the expansion of future development in the area, and I wondered if officers could give us a comment on that.
Well, as part of this application, we're only assessing what's in front of us. We can't take into account that something may happen on a different site in the future. We just have to assess the planning application that's in front of us.
Right. Okay, that's clear. Thank you. Thanks, convener.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gregg. Members, is there anybody else got a question? I had a question. I don't mind which of the representatives want to answer it. There was a question around, or a statement made that there was additional housing put forward in the initial planning. Was that on more of the green fields, or was that on the current proposed site?
Well, I think Mr Clark could best answer that, but this goes way back a number of years where there were 90 mainstream houses applied for as part of the currently farmland. And that was the developer knew they weren't going to get that, so they withdrew it and focused on the retirement housing. Well, I can understand the tactics, but if there is a precedent created, then there's no doubt in my mind they would be looking for further expansion.
I'll just add a section in there. Obviously, when the proposal application notice was first submitted, it included an enlarged area to the northeast, but that was obviously refined to the current submission. So what we have in front of us is what we are considering.
Okay, thanks. Okay, that's fine. There was a reference to Woodland Grove and also Tornadee. Now, I think I understand the references and how they are configured, but perhaps maybe Caroline, if you'd like to explain, because I know that you've referenced both. It's more really for the other members to understand the setup there, probably. I think many of them will remember Tornadee Hospital. I think we've all been around the city long enough to know that, but I suppose if you could maybe just give us a bit more clarity around that.
Okay, Woodland Grove has been built on the site of Tornadee Hospital, so I suppose you know, the applicants in their demonstration has shown beautiful old buildings with mature grounds and mature trees and walkways and so on, and that actually exists already at Woodland Grove. That is what Tornadee Hospital has been turned into. It has been marketed for over 55-year-olds, and it actually took many years to sell all the properties there. There were additional apartments added to the site, and there is still room within the grounds for further apartments to be built, and there is planning permission for another stage, which has not materialised because of the slow rate of sale of the properties that are there. It actually also sits just slightly back from the North Deeside Road, so there's direct access to the bus stops on to transport links on the North Deeside Road. Within the grounds there's also a nursing home. It's Tornadee Nursing Home. It's a 5-star nursing home, or 5-star accommodation nursing home. And again, there is room within that area for further development of that if there was further nursing home provision required. There's quite a large part of that site is not developed. And the majority of the workforce that work in Tornadee access there by bus. I work in health care, so I know the workforce, and carers are generally paid living wage, minimum wage, so we're not talking about car drivers, and the same with the majority of staff that work in care facilities. So access to a bus stop is really quite important, and most of the workforce of Tornadee arrive by bus. You see that happening several times per day.
Okay, thanks very much. Can I just check, there's been reference obviously about the Miltimber School site, and it's probably just to get clarification maybe from the Community Council that they are supportive of some form of development there. Mr. Mosley, I know that we've already had you, but giving your part of the community representation.
Yeah, thanks, convener. No, I just wanted to clarify where we are on the Miltimber community, the Miltimber Primary School site. In the consultations on the proposed ALDP 20 last year, we pointed out that probably a bit over half of that site is currently green space, as Caroline has mentioned. And we would certainly want to see that sort of proportion being maintained, because there isn't actually now very much public green space available in Miltimber. We've lost the field on the west side of Contlaw Road. So I think there's definitely, the public enjoy that space. So any development really ought to be restricted. Although the whole area has been zoned as residential in the new plan, we wouldn't want to see the whole thing built out. So I think there's scope for some age suitable housing, but probably not on the scale that the development under discussion today would have needed.
Okay,
Thanks
thank you, Councillor Morris. Mr. Mosley, I'm calling you Councillor there. Yvonne. Councillor Allen.
Yes, thanks. I would like to ask Caroline, is she aware if any of the properties at Tornadee are lease options, or are they all for private sale?
To be honest, I don't know that. I think they're all for private sale. I don't know. There are properties in Cults where there is I think shared options. I think like they're in the McCarthy Stone. But I haven't looked into any of the details to purchasing or leasing.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Allen. Right, any further questions? I'm not seeing any further hands. Okay. Right, so I think that concludes the session for today, and I'd just like to thank all participants, both the representatives of the Community Council, and of course the applicant. I think it's been a really informative session. What will go forward from today is that there'll be a minute prepared by the clerk, and together this will be put with the case officer's final report of handling the Planning Development Management Committee, which the members are all members of today, and I chair. And we'll take consideration and determination at that point. Unfortunately, I can't give you a timeline as yet. It will officers will go away and evaluate everything from today, and we'll bring one forward. I'm sure. Stan, are you your hands?
Sorry, I've just realised that I didn't answer Yvonne Allen's question fully, and there are rental properties available leasehold properties available within the area. There are leasehold properties available in Cults, and there's also leasehold properties available in Cooter.
Thank you for that, but I was actually asking about Tornadee.
Okay, thank you.
Right, thank you. So as I say, that concludes the business for today, and it will come back to my next planning committee as soon as the information has been processed. So thank you all for attending today. That concludes today's session. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, convener. Thank you.